On today's episode of Locked On Canucks, we get controversial, divisive, and downright shocking as I list my top 5 greatest Canucks of all time. It is Locked On Canucks, and it starts now.
You're Locked On Canucks, your daily podcast on the Vancouver Canucks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, everybody? Welcome to Locked On Canucks, the show that keeps you locked in on all things Vancouver Canucks. I'm, of course, your host, Justin Cooney. You can find me at Twitter at _process. It's our show's Twitter at Locked On Canucks. Please also like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Guys, this episode right here, hopefully will create a lot of discussion. Hopefully will create a lot of debate. Hopefully will create a lot of people either agreeing with me or disagreeing with me, because that is what we are here to do when we talk sports. We're here to create discussion and talking points, especially in a time right now when Canuckland, there's not much going on where we can talk and debate about certain aspects. So, backstory. I'm sitting at a nail salon. Now, don't brush me wrong. I was getting a pedicure. Now, it's completely fine for males to get pedicures. I went with my mother and sister, family bonding, because I am going to the Okanagan this weekend. I want to make sure my feet were, well manicured for Kelowna. So sitting there, and on Twitter I see somebody out there say, "Hey, who are your top 5 Canucks of all time?" And the person had Burritt, number 1, the Sadines, and I forget the rest of this. But I was like, you know what? I disagree with that list. My list is much more. I thought my list was facts. And, if anybody who knows me knows that when I say something, I mean it. And when I have an opinion, I mean it and I bleed it. So the person out there, just put out who are the Canucks best 5 players in best 5 players in history. And I went through it. People were like Burritt, Bertuzzi, Hughes, Linden, Ronning. Somebody was like Sadine, Burritt, Naslund, Linden, Gradine. Other people had Burritt, and then I was like, people had Quinn Hughes in there already. And I'm like, you know what? It's too much for me. It's too much. Too much. I have to voice my opinion because I am the host of Locked On Canucks, and I like to have my opinion be heard. So, sitting there, getting my pedicure and everything, and I go, okay, who are the top 5 Canucks of all time? Of course, Henrik and Daniel Sadine, 1A. I put Henrik at number 1. I put Daniel Sadine at number 2. I put Roberto Luongo at number 3, Pavel Burritt at number 4, and Marcus Naslund at number 5. Now, a lot of you might be freaking out, like, oh my God, you don't have Trevor Linden on your list? Oh my God, why is Trevor Linden? Well, that's what this episode here is for. I'm going to go through each one of these players individually and explain to you why I have them where they are on this top 5 list. And hopefully by the end of the list, you either agree with me or you think I'm an absolute idiot and disagree with me, which I want to hear because I love to hear varying opinions about the Canucks. So without further ado, let's just jump right in. So let's start off with number 5. Marcus Naslund, number 19, which hangs in the rafters at Rogers Arena. The captain of the Canucks for an entire generation of Canucks fans was their guy. And I am part of that generation where he is my guy. He is my captain. He was my first hockey hero. So if you think I'm biased, well, I am. But I always have a saying, men lie, women lie, but numbers never lie. And when you're comparing Marcus Naslund to Trevor Linden, because that was a debate, Marcus Naslund to Trevor Linden, the numbers all go towards Marcus Naslund. More goals, more assists, more points. The captain, wash. Now, everybody says, oh, well, Trevor Linden was a part of a team that went to 90, the cup run in 94. I get that. I understand that completely. But what Marcus Naslund did in a dead puck era, in an era where clutching and grabbing were so predominant. Linden was a part of that 94, which was just before the dead puck era kind of began, where I consider the dead puck era beginning when New Jersey won their first cup in 95 to bookend again when Tampa won their cup in 04, and then you had the post lockout where the clutching and grabbing was gone. So New Jersey won 3 Stanley Cups in that 9 to 10 year span. Marcus Naslund was a 100-point guy during that period of time. He won league MVP as voted on by the players. The numbers speak for themselves. He was the leader of that team. People, like to glorify Trevor Linden as Mr. Canuck, and he was a great Canuck, right? But Marcus Naslund, if we're talking just on ice, and that's what I'm doing right now, just on ice, pure on ice ability and on ice impact, Marcus Naslund has a far, far greater on ice impact than Trevor Linden had, in my personal opinion. The wrist shot, the passing ability, the ability to change a game and be a game breaker. Trevor Linden scored 30 goals. Now, I want people to understand this. I think Trevor Linden is, when you think of the Canucks, he's one of the few names you think of right away. Many people will put him before Marcus Naslund, but to me, Marcus Naslund quite simply helped a team that was in the doldrums of the bottom of the NHL. Probably the darkest period in Canucks history was when Marcus Naslund arrived during the Mike Keenan era, following the era that Mike Keenan era saw Trevor Linden get traded away, that saw him get stripped of his captaincy, right? Marcus Naslund was the founding piece, the integral piece of that era that ushered out of that Keenan era into the Crawford and West Coast Express era, which put the Canucks back on the hockey map, right? Without Marcus Naslund, which was one of the most lopsided trades in NHL history, without Marcus Naslund and Brian Burke and Mark Crawford and Todd Bertuzzi and Brendan Morrison, right? Who knows how that could have changed the course of franchise history, right? Henrik and Daniel Sadine came in right when Marcus Naslund became the captain. And they attest a lot of the success they had to him, seeing him prepare, seeing him be a leader. Now, Marcus Naslund might not have been the emotional leader like Trevor Linden was, but he led by example. He was a guy who didn't have to say much, but was one of the hardest workers on the team. Always spoke to the media after games, was held accountable, right? And people always say, well, the playoff success wasn't there. Well, hockey is the ultimate team game, right? You have to get lucky and you have to get bounces go your way. In 94, the Canucks had stuff go their way. Yes, they were a good team that was knocking the doors the year before that were in the same predicament as the Naslund Canucks. Teams that put up 100 points but failed in the playoffs. They hit lightning in a bottle in 94. And yes, that's a deterrent to Marcus Naslund and that West Coast Express team that should have gone farther in the playoffs that didn't. They did choke the 3-1 lead to Minnesota. And then, of course, they had the Todd Bertuzzi incident in 04, which kind of essentially, looking back on that era of Canucks hockey, just kind of popped the balloon and kind of killed it. But when I look at all the numbers, Marcus Naslund, when you retire with the Canucks, leading goal scorer, leading point man, he was the most prolific Canuck at that point in time when he retired. Next to Pavel Burritt and stuff like that. Pavel Burritt had more stats and more accolades, and we'll get to him. But Marcus Naslund, the reason why I put him above Trevor Linden is because of the impact he had on the game, being one of the best players in the league at his peak, and helping the Canucks regain back into relevancy, into contention status. So to me, Marcus Naslund is number 5 on the all-time Canucks list of all time. Trevor Linden is 6th. It's close. And again, we're talking about the totality of being a Canuck, and impact on and off the ice. It's a different story, but I'm talking about strictly on ice performance. The 5th best player to ever lace up the skates for the Vancouver Canucks. was Marcus Naslund. Now, coming up after this break, I'm going to be going to two players who spent time in both Sunrise, Florida and Vancouver. So stick around for that. I'm pretty sure you guys know who that will be. But first, I want to talk to you guys about the fine folks at betonline.net, which is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your betting needs. Find all your favorite sports events and number one source for online betting. Your favorite sports and events and your number one online source for odds, lines, and games. Find reviews and news of every league, including Major League Baseball, the NFL, the NBA, NHL, combat sports, esports, and even golf. BetOnline continues to be the number one top online resource for all your sporting wagering information, from live in-game betting, scores, podcasts. They have you covered. Head to BetOnline today or use your mobile device to learn more about the action happening today. BetOnline, where the game starts. Okay, we are back. Locked On Canucks, the show that keeps you locked in on all things Vancouver Canucks. I'm going through my top 5 Canucks of all time. Now, as I mentioned, this is the 5 best players strictly on ice, not the totality of on ice, off ice impact, just the 5 best players who played for the Vancouver Canucks. So we had number 5, Marcus Naslund. Number 4 is the Russian rocket Pavel Burritt. Of course, back-to-back 60-goal seasons, 50-goal seasons, the most exciting player in the NHL, the first superstar to ever play for the Vancouver Canucks. Quite frankly, the most talented player to ever play for the Vancouver Canucks. Pavel Burritt came over from Russia, on a loophole in the draft. Arrived. We all know the stunning debut against the Winnipeg Jets. And immediately, won the Calder Trophy, was a catalyst for the 94 Cup run. Injuries, then a trade request kind of damaged his impact in Vancouver, was brought back when he was finally inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame, and kind of repaired his image in Vancouver. But when we look at Pavel Burritt, he was the very first superstar the Canucks had ever had. And quite frankly, other than Marcus Naslund during a small part of his peak, and Henrik and Daniel Sadine, and maybe Roberto Luongo, there haven't been those type of superstars in Vancouver. But he was electric. He was different. He had the speed, the shot, the skill, the grit, and he looked like a rock star. He was a rock star in Vancouver. Bag loads of fan mail, herds of people following him everywhere. He was the man, and he had the city in the palm of his hand. Pavel Burritt left people in awe. Pavel Burritt was the reason a lot of people got into hockey. I wasn't alive during Burritt's prime in Vancouver. I'm born in 96, so 1996, excuse me. So I'm, caught the tail end of Burritt's time, but I don't remember when he was dealt. And then during his prime in the early 90s, I wasn't alive. But from everybody that tells me, Pavel Burritt was the reason they got into the Vancouver Canucks. He was the reason they got into hockey because he made it look so graceful, so effortlessly, so beautiful. And he played at such a speed that I'd never seen before that just seemed unimaginable. Somebody could skate that fast and do that with a stick and puck is unimaginable. And when I think of Pavel Burritt, I think of a guy who is a Hockey Hall of Famer. And quite frankly, the next people on this list, as you can probably guess, are Hockey Hall of Famers. So he's in that certain class of a hockey player. He's a part of that group, that elite group that they all say, the greatest accomplishment, or the greatest, not accomplishment, but the greatest feat individually for a player is to be in the Hockey Hall of Fame. And he's a part of that group. And he had his best time with the Vancouver Canucks. Yes, he had some great years in Florida, won the Rocket Richard a couple times out there, but he was best known for his time in Vancouver, where, he was at the peak of his powers. And he just brought a sense of legitimacy again to the Vancouver Canucks, a team that was on the rise, that was building itself up to become a contender and eventually reach that level. And Pavel Burritt was the man. So I think when you think about the Vancouver Canucks, Pavel Burritt is the most skilled player to ever play for the Vancouver Canucks. I think by far, unless I think the players now are extremely skilled, extremely talented, but nobody can skate that fast and do the things he did with the puck at that speed on the Canucks roster right now or ever before. So Pavel Burritt to me was the first rock star, the first superstar, and just the guy that made it look so easy. And for that reason alone, he's number 4 on my list. Number 3 is just another first ballot hockey Hall of Fame that again, spent time in Florida. Of course, the Canucks acquired him from Florida. Dave Nonis pulled up that blockbuster deal acquiring number 1, Roberto Luongo, who's number 1, will be in the Raptors this year. I hope so. Roberto Luongo, again, was the first legitimate stud number 1 with a bullet goalie in Vancouver Canucks history. Yes, Kirk McLean had some good years, but when you, again, Roberto Luongo, when he came here, had a pedigree of being an elite goalie. Vancouver was known as a goalie graveyard for years before. You had the Alex Alls, the Dan Kluches, the Peter Skudras, the Felix Potvins, the Arthurs Irvins, whoever, name them all. The Canucks were a goalie graveyard for years before Roberto Luongo got to Vancouver and gave the legitimacy to the Canucks. He's the greatest goalie in Canucks history. All the records say it. All the records spew it. He is the greatest goalie in Canucks history. He's one of the greatest goalies in Canadian history. Winning a gold medal in Canada, in Vancouver, his home city at the time. Roberto Luongo, not only the most talented goalie in Canucks history, the best goalie in Canucks history, but he also is one of the most important pieces in Canucks history, because if that trade does not happen and they don't get Roberto Luongo back in 2006, the summer before the 06-07 season, the Canucks never go to 2011. That never happens because they needed that guy, that guy back there where they could say, hey, we can play more of an up-tempo game because we know we have a goalie back there who will save our bacon on nights. And you saw that in year 1, right at the shoot. Roberto Lewango should have won the Hart Trophy and the Vezina Trophy that year. He was the best goalie on the planet. He was the most important player on the planet for his team that year. Go back, look at the stats, watch the tape. Roberto Luongo was the only reason the Vancouver Canucks were a playoff team in 07. Then, they made it back to the stop up in 08. But then once Mike Gillis came in and started rebuilding that team, you saw just how important Roberto Luongo was. That's why they gave him that big deal that ended up being my contract sucks. And I know he left like Burritt on unceremonious terms, but at the end of the day, those Lou chants that would go through Rogers Arena spoke volumes to just who he was as a player, and people just loved Roberto Luongo. I have a Roberto Luongo jersey in this closet right here that I still cherish to this day, because Roberto Luongo, again, like Pavel Burritt, Marcus hasn't brought legitimacy to the Vancouver Canucks. He was a number 1A goalie with a bullet, one of the best goalies on the planet, and he was in Vancouver, shored up that position, and allowed the Canucks to. He was one of the foundational pieces to allow the Canucks to go to the Stanley Cup Finals in 2011 and finish 1 win away from a Stanley Cup. So that's the 4. The 3. Excuse me, 3 so far. We're going to go to the final 2, which is very obvious. But Marcus Naslund, Pavel Burritt, Roberto Luongo, all 3 integral parts of this franchise history. All 3 brought legitimacy back to a franchise, and all 3 are one of the greatest Canucks of all time, and all 3 will have their numbers in Rogers Arena's rafters. But coming up, last break, we're going to close off the last 2. You know who. 22, 33, and I'll just hammer again why they are the greatest players in Canucks history. So stick around. And welcome back to Locked On Canucks, the show that keeps you locked in on all things Vancouver Canucks. So again, top 5 Canucks of all time episode, number 5, number 19, but number 1 in my heart, my childhood hockey hero, Marcus Naslund. Then the Russian Rocket, number 10, Hockey Hall of Famer, Pavel Burritt. Then we have Hockey Hall of Famer, first ballot Hockey Hall of Fame. Put some respect on his name. Number 1, Bobby Lou, Roberto Luongo. And then number 2, we have Daniel Sadine. And you might be like, oh, why do you have Daniel behind Henrik? Well, the simple fact, because when Henrik Sedin won the Hart Trophy in 2010, it's because his brother Daniel Sedin missed a bunch of games and he stepped up and started scoring goals and helped carry the Canucks to the playoffs that year. That, to me, was a defining factor. They were yes, Henrik Sedin had more points and stuff like that. And all, but that, again, that didn't really matter to me. What mattered to me was in 2010, Henrik Sedin stepped up when he had to, won the Hart Trophy when his brother Daniel Sedin was out with injury, and became just that alpha in the Canucks locker room. Now, when I look at the Sedins, you'll never see this ever again. You will never see two twin brothers come in the league at the same time, play for the same team, retire together, go into the Hall of Fame together, first ballot, both win MVPs. Henrik the Hart Trophy, Daniel Sedin the Lester Pearson Trophy. Or the MVP was voted on by the players. What more can you say? The twin telepathy, the ability to dominate the game. There was a point in time in that 3-4 year span where those two were the most dominant players in the league. Those two together were better than any player combo out there, and you'll never see it ever again. That's why they won back-to-back President's Trophies. That's why they won back-to-back scoring titles. That's why the Canucks were such a vaunted team. That's why people say the Canucks were the greatest, the 2011 Canucks were the greatest team to never win the Stanley Cup, because they had 2 MVPs on their team, 3 first ballot Hall of Famers, 2 scoring champions. And those guys, again, solidify the fact that Mike Gillis was right in keeping them, solidify the fact that you can win this way. People said you couldn't win with these guys. They said they're too weak, too small, too slender, and they weren't the guys to build around. Well, they told you that, and they proved to you that, hey, you can win with us. We're not going to drop the mitts. We're not going to be rah guys. We're going to do it our way. We're going to play our game. We're going to play along the board cycle, wear you down, puck possession, and kill you on the power play. And that's exactly what they did. Henrik and Daniel Sedin did it their way. The hardest workers, great leaders, great people, great ambassadors for the game of hockey. I'm not even talking about what they did off the ice, which makes it even better. But the fact that Henrik and Daniel Sedin were that dominant, that showed hard work and work ethic, and again, legitimized the fact that they could win their way. Simple. 1 and 2. That's it. It's easy. So that's my top 5. Number 5, Marcus Naslund. Number 4, Pavel Burritt. Number 3, Roberto Luongo. Number 2, Daniel Sedin. Number 1, Henrik Sedin. Those are my 5 greatest Canucks of all time, strictly on ice performance-wise. I'm not talking about totality, on ice, off ice, impact of the franchise, all that. I'm talking about guys who just laced up the skates and were the best players to ever play for the Vancouver Canucks. Those are my 5. So I want to hear from you in the comment section below, on Twitter, on whatever. Tell me, are you right? Tell me why you are right. Tell me why I'm wrong. Or if you agree with me, just tell me, hey, I agree with you. Your list is valid. And that is that. I want to thank you guys for making Locked On Canucks your first listen of the day. Tomorrow, another fun episode. I'm going to be going through some unsung heroes and forgotten Canucks that we kind of forget about, but we will never forget the impact they have on the organization. So that will be tomorrow's episode. So I cannot wait for you guys to hear that. After this, I want you guys to take a listen to Locked On NHL. It gives our Locked On experts give you a daily 30-minute podcast on all things NHL all year long. Stay up to date on everything in the hockey world. Locked On NHL, your daily 30-minute NHL podcast. Take care, guys. Stay safe. I will talk to you tomorrow.